BA Honours Psychology, Psychological Research, PSY 05. Very good morning to all my dear students. Today the topic is quasi-experimental methods. You see, the paper is psychological research. In psychological research, re means again, search means to find something. When you are trying to find something new or you are replicating any work which the earlier people have done, you want to verify it, you will have to adopt certain methods. Now, in that methods, in psychology, we have experimental method and the quasi-experimental methods. Today, we will be talking about quasi-experimental methods. So, let us start. Quasi-experimental methods can be understood as follows. Quasi-experiments are non-experimental methods in which field experiments and field studies may be included. First, let us talk about what do we mean by non-experimental research. Now, I tell you, when we do the research, one is experiment and another is the non-experimental method. What is an experiment? Experiment means when you are making observation under controlled conditions. Now, we will talk about in the experimental method, we will have the independent variable. I will tell you there that what is independent variable, which we can manipulate, increase or decrease as per the requirement. Now, what is the effect of independent on dependent we will study, but certain other variables also affect the dependent variable. They are called extraneous variables, and those extraneous variables we control. We will talk about with examples when we will talk about the experimental method. So, that means when we talk about the experimental method, there we rigorously, religiously manipulate the independent and control the extraneous variable. Whereas in the quasi, the name quasi, partly, which is not complete, scientific. So, in this method, what we do the field experiments in which the control of the variables is not possible, we do not control it. That is why we call it as a quasi-experimental methods. So, that is why I said that first let us talk about what do we mean by non-experimental research. As the name reflects, this research lacks the required conditions of experimental research. In non-experimental research, the researcher cannot manipulate the independent variable or variables. In research, we have one variable, we may have more than one variable. So, independent variable or variables, also because independent variables may have already occurred. For example, if we want to study the effect of abuse on mental health of children, in this case, the independent variable, that is abuse, has already occurred. The non-experimental research is high on external validity and can be generalized on a larger population. As I told you, as the name reflects, non-experimental, where the manipulation of the independent variable is not possible. Now, when we say independent variable manipulation, by manipulation means we can increase or decrease that variable. For example, I want to study the effect of the noise on the learning behavior or on the concentration of the students. Now, here noise will become independent variable. Now, this independent variable noise can be increased or decreased. I can ask, I have some voices, I have the volume on the tape recorder. So, by that volume, I can increase or decrease. I can decrease the voice, I can decrease the noise. So, that variable I can manipulate. That means manipulate means increasing or decreasing, that is in my hand. But when you come to the non-experimental, you are studying which is already occurred. So, how you will manipulate it? For example, I want to study the effect of abuse. Now, abuse has already occurred. You can't increase or decrease, but I can study its impact on the human behavior or on the population. Now, elections has been done. The people have voted. Now, I want to study that what is the effect of voting on a particular behavior on democracy, attitude towards the democracy, attitude towards the bureaucracy, attitude towards the political parties, whatever I want to study. Now, election has already occurred. The people have already voted. That behavior has been done. So, I neither increase nor decrease. So, this method will become as a non-experimental research. The non-experimental research is high on external validity. Now, when we say external validity, when we'll talk about the psychological test, validity means truthfulness. Actually, it is happening or now, not. Internal validity means control. External validity means generalizability. Can we generalize the result of the research on a larger population or on a limited population? Now, since this research you are doing on a larger public, so the non-experimental research is high on external validity and can be generalized on a larger population. Whenever you will study, we will talk about even the sampling method. We have the population and from that population we take the sample. Now, whatever the results we have got on the sample, we generalize on the population and assume that it will happen in the general population. For example, I have chosen only 30, 40, 100 students of a university or the college, and I have tried to study that what is the impact of this variable on the behavior. Now, whatever the result I am getting on the 100 students, that is my sample, I will generalize that this behavior will have on all the college students, the population from where I have taken that sample. I will talk you in detail how we select the sample and even what is the meaning of the population. So, in the non-experimental research, whatever the result we have, we can generalize on a larger sample on a larger population. This method can also be used when the participants cannot be randomly assigned. For example, in a study to analyze whether a damage in midbrain affects the sleep of participants, participants cannot be randomly assigned due to the nature of the sample. Though it can study causal relationship without manipulating the independent variables. It can also be used in exploratory research. For example, a study to explore how efficiently child can be nurtured by single mothers. Now, try to understand the first. In the scientific research, randomization is one of the very important. Randomization means we will talk about the random sampling, where we take the sample according to a certain principle. Now, what is the condition of the random sampling? Every person has equal chance of being selected in the sample, number one. Number two, selection of one will not affect the selection of the other. Now, this is randomization, and what are the techniques? I will tell you lottery method, nth number, then the random tables we will talk about when we will talk about the sampling topic or the chapter will come on that chapter. Now, randomization is one of the important characteristics of research because biases do not emerge. If I am random, you have the 40 students, I want to take 10. I said, well, you, every 10 students come. I have no bias, I am objective. So, that is the condition of the scientific research. But when we come to the quasi-experimental, there are certain conditions where randomization is not possible. For example, I have given you example that what is the effect of damage in midbrain on the sleep. Now, you know our whole behavior governs by the central nervous system, that is the brain. If a particular part of the brain is damaged, how it is going to affect the sleep? Whether the sleep is totally disturbed, which we say white night, you don't get any sleep in the night, or it is partly or sound sleep or less sound. Now, I will have to take the sample, the persons whose midbrain has been damaged or there is something wrong or problem in the midbrain damage. Now, in such case, I will have only a selective sample. I will have only 5-10 cases whose this part of the brain is damaged. Now, if I have only 5 patients, 5 persons with a damaged brain, now how I can assign the randomization? Now, I will have to study the 5 persons, I can't do randomization. So, in this technique, you know, randomization is not possible. So, it is mostly, it can be used even in the exploratory research, where you are to explore something. For example, a study to explore how efficiently child can be nurtured by single mothers. Now, the single mothers who are single, now how they are nurturing the child. Now, this sample, you know how I can do the randomization? Randomization is not possible because this sample will be limited, the number will be limited. So, in such cases, we can use the non-experimental method. Now, I will now talk about some of the important characteristics of the non-experimental research. Now, when you are conducting the non-experimental research, what are the main characteristics which you should keep in mind? So, if you know the characteristics, you can very well understand this method. Number one, the independent variable cannot be manipulated. I have told about in detail. The independent variable is manipulated in experimental research. That is the important condition. But when you are doing the non-experimental, the independent variable cannot be controlled. Now, you want to study, for example, you want to study the mob behavior, how the people are behaving in a procession. When in a procession, in a particular festival, they are enjoying it, they are not enjoying it. Now, here I want to study the effect of the festival on the enjoyment of the persons. Now, how I can manipulate that mob, how I can manipulate the festival? So, independent variable here is not manipulated. We can't increase or decrease, we just see the effect of independent on the dependent. Number two, there is low control. As I told you, what we control? We control extraneous variable. If we don't control the extraneous variable, it will have its effect on the dependent variable. Now, what is the purpose of the research? Why we do the research? We want to study the causal relationship between independent and the dependent variable. How manipulation, increasing or decreasing independent variable will affect the behavior which we are studying in our research. So, we control the extraneous variable, otherwise what will happen? I will give you example when I will talk about the the experimental method. Then the dependent variable will be affected by extraneous plus independent. So, whereas the purpose is only to study the independent. So, here in non-experimental, we cannot control the extraneous variable, we don't control. So, low control is here, the maximization of the control is not possible in non-experimental method. Randomization cannot be done. As I told you, now we have only 5 cases of brain damage, randomization is not possible. We have only 10 single mothers, randomization is not possible. And if randomization is not possible, that is the limitation of the research, the biases can emerge. External validity is high. External validity is high. As I told you, validity, truthfulness. Actually, validity term is used in the case of the psychological testing. When I will talk to that method, I will tell you reliability, validity, how it is calculated, I will talk about. In experimental or in research, external validity means generalization and internal validity means the control, how we are controlling the variables. Now, external validity is high. As I told you, now I want to study the effect on I want to study mob behavior. Now, mob behavior is a large, huge. You want to see in the Dussehra Mela, in the Deepavali Mela, whatever the function you are enjoying it, you want to study. Now, if you go to the ground, lot of people are there enjoying that festival. Now, if I say because of this factor, because of these crackers, the people enjoyed. Because of the cracker, people didn't enjoy the cracking was not proper, it was faulty. So, I can generalize the result on a larger group because the larger sample is there. Whereas, as I told you, what is the effect of brain damage on sleep? The sample is limited. So, external validity is high, that means generalizability of the result is maximum. Internal validity is low because I told you just now the control is not possible. If the control is not possible, then the results are not that pure as they should be after the control. They will have the impact of the extraneous variable. So, randomization cannot be done. The control is low, independent variable is not manipulated, generalizability, external validity is higher and control is low, that is internal validity is low. Now, what are the methods which we do when we talk about the non-experimental research? One is field experiments. We do experiments in the field, not in the quasi. The field, for example, when you say that we are doing the research on, experimental method, we do in the laboratory in the controlled conditions. Now, field experiment means experiments in the field. The field experiments are conducted in natural setting within the environment of the participant, for example, classroom. As I told you that when we do the experiments, they are done under the controlled conditions. Lab facility should be there, but field experiments are done in the natural setting where actually the people are working. For example, I have given classroom. I want to study the behavior of the children in the classroom. Now, if I bring those children in the laboratory and do the control conditions, what are control conditions we will talk about later on, then it will become experiment. In field experiments, the study is done on the place then and there where the people are working. That is the natural setting. I want to study the effect, I want to study the behavior of the patients. Natural setting is the hospital. I want to study the impact in the office, the natural setting is office, how the people are working. So, here the study is done in the field experiment, in the participant, in the natural setting, for example, the classroom, office, etc. The experimenter can manipulate independent variables, though control may not be high. Little bit control you have, but the rigorous control is not possible. Clear? Rigorous control is not possible, randomization is not possible, elimination cannot be there, but little bit control you can do. An example of field experiment done in the field of psychology is Holfing's experiment, hospital study on obedience. Is a study done by the Holfing. The advantages of field experiments are that the behavior reflected by the participants in real life setting is natural and spontaneous. The chances of demand characteristics affecting the results are low, and it has higher ecological validity than the laboratory experiments. What is the advantage? When you ultimate, even if you do the study in the laboratory, ultimate you will have to generalize on whom? The public. In the natural setting, we can't say that whatever is happened in the lab will actually happen in the field. So, that is the limitation of experimental method. But here, since you are doing the study in the field, in the natural study setting, so the behavior will be natural, there will be no artificiality, the behavior will be spontaneous. So, that is why, because the other characteristics which we demand, the desirable social desirable factors will not emerge. The children are playing in the natural setting, the player is playing in the natural setting. He doesn't worry that there is a camera or there is this control, that control, he is least bothered about, the behavior will be natural. So, if the behavior is natural, the ecological validity will be higher. What is ecology? Environment. So, environmental field validity will be higher in comparison to the laboratory experiment. Now, there are certain disadvantages also. The disadvantage of this research is that it has no control over the extraneous variables which might affect the results. As I told you that in experiments, in research, the extraneous variable will have to be controlled. Unless and until we control the extraneous variables, the impact on the dependent variable, on the behavior which you are studying will not be pure. It will be, we can say, have the effect of the errors. So, since extraneous variables are in the natural setting, I can't control the extraneous variables. So, extraneous variable may affect the results. As a result, the result which we are getting will not be that much scientific in comparison to the laboratory study. The second, also, as it is done in the natural setting, it is difficult to replicate field experiments. One of the important characteristics of the research is replication, verifiability. Now, if you want to verify any scientific result, create that environment in the laboratory and study it. You will have almost the same results. But can you replicate the natural environment which was today? can this same environment will be tomorrow? It may change. It may change. Today, there are only 20 students in the class and I am studying. Tomorrow, there are 40 students in the class. If the 40 students in the class, the number is increasing. When the number is increasing, that number may have the impact. Today, 20 students A, B, C, D is there. Tomorrow, X, Y, Z are there. So, if the persons are changing, it may have impact on the behavior. So, if you do the mob study, today 100 people are in a procession, tomorrow the other 100 people may have in that procession. So, it is difficult to replicate the field experiment, whereas in experiment we can regenerate the same conditions and we may do the replication research, whereas here it is not possible because we can't control that. So, characteristics of the field experiments are as follows. The researcher can manipulate the independent variable, control is not high, this we have already talked about. Now, we will talk about the field studies. These researches are non-experimental in nature. As a researcher does not manipulate any variable and research is carried out in the natural setting. The data can be collected through face-to-face interviews, surveys or direct observation. The data collected is, now that was field experiment, now we will talk about the field studies. Face-to-face interviews, surveys or direct observations. The data collected is specific to a particular issue or problem. The researcher carefully plans the procedure of research and ensures that the data is accurate, valid and collected efficiently. Now, let us explain now first this method. In the field studies, you can not manipulate the independent variable as was done in the field experiment. Now, here the data is collected through various methods, that may be face-to-face interview, you can do the observation, you can simply have the participant observation, non-participant observation. You are studying the mob behavior, for example, field study, you are in the field. Now, I can't manipulate the independent variable, but you can personally talk to the persons, what is your opinion of this particular procession, why it is happening, why that man is shouting, why that man is least interested, you can interview. Now, face to face you can interview is a technique we will talk about in detail in the methods. In the face to face interview, you can collect the data in the field studies. You can observe, don't you simply stand outside and do the observation. You merge in that group and do the observation. The data is collected by observation or face to face interviews, and as I have told you, before field study you make a plan so that the data should be accurate as far as possible, valid and collected efficiently. The data is analyzed and interpreted accordingly. Now, whatever the data you have collected, now you will interpret the data, analyze the data and interpretation. Now, you have done the interview. Now, what are the answers of the people? We do content analysis. Whatever the content we have got, we will analyze. Now, we have observed certain observations. This person was doing this, it was peculiar behavior, he was not shouting, he was just smiling, the smiling was very mysterious, he was laughing loudly. My observation, observation. Now, I will analyze why is it so, and then we will have the interpretation of that data accordingly. The advantages of the field studies are that they can be used in studies where manipulation of independent is not possible. Now, there are so many behavior where even the manipulation cannot be done, experimentation cannot be done. If I want to, as I told you, I want to study that what is the effect of marriage traditions, particular marriage systems are the processes they are adopting, Mehndi Rasam, this category on the behavior. Now, can I manipulate or can I arrange this in the laboratory? I want to study how the voting behavior is there when the people, now elections are there, I am talking, that is why I am giving this example. When the people are coming to vote, what is in their mind, what is in their mind, what they are thinking, whom they will vote, what are their considerations. They are standing in a queue. Now, can I generate this situation in the laboratory? Now, for this I will have to go in the field. So, the main advantage is that number of behaviors cannot be generated in the laboratory, we will have to do in the field. So, this is the advantage that we can study such behavior in the field studies. It is also useful in areas where manipulation of independent variables are not ethical. In number of conditions, it is not ethical to manipulate the independent variable. Now, I want to study shocking behavior on the aversive behavior which are negative on the behavior. Now, if I give shock to everybody or on the sample, it is not ethical. But if something happens negatively in the family or in the society, we can very well observe that how the people are behaving. When the corona was there, the families who suffered, when the news came to them that their person is no more, now I can very well see that what is the behavior I can observe, but it is not possible to create such condition ethically in the laboratory. The disadvantage of these methods are that there are possibility of ethical challenges like deception involved in the study. There are more chances of sampling bias, and there may be influence of the extraneous variable in the study. Now, number of things can be extraneous variables may be there, even the unethical behavior may be there. So, there are some problems, but advantage is simply that we can study in a mob, in a natural setting, the behavior. Now, in this lecture, I have used the three terms. Laboratory experiments, I will talk in detail, no doubt about it, I will tell you each and everything. Then I uttered the word field experiment, and then we said field studies. Now, I have made a chart for you where we can study the differences between the three. Now, if you look at the slide, laboratory experiment, field experiment and field study. Number one, experiments are conducted under controlled conditions. I have told you extraneous variables are controlled, so need not to explain here. Field experiments are not conducted under the controlled setting, and field study researchers are conducted in the natural setting. Field experiment is not done in the controlled setting. You can do even in the laboratory without controlling, whereas field studies are done in the natural setting and laboratory experiments are done in the controlled conditions. Number two, experimenter can manipulate independent variable as well as control extraneous variable. I have told you the meaning of manipulation. In field experiment, experimenter can control independent variable but has no control over the extraneous variables. He can little bit control the independent variable, increase or decrease, but as far as the extraneous variables are there, he has no control in the field experiment, whereas in the laboratory experiment there is a control on the extraneous variables. In what is situation in the field studies on this dimension? Researcher can neither manipulate independent variable nor control the extraneous variable. So, in the field studies, neither the independent variables can be manipulated nor the extraneous variables are controlled. Whereas, in field experiments, you can control independent variable, but you cannot control the extraneous variable, whereas in the laboratory setting, we will manipulate independent and also control the extraneous variable. Now come to the third. In rigorous experiment, ecological validity is lowest. Why ecological validity is lowest? Because we are confined to laboratory. We are conducting experiment in the lab. We are not going to the field. We are not doing in the field setting. So, ecological validity is less. That means generalizability is low. Whereas in the second field experiment, ecological validity is comparatively higher in comparison to the experiment, because here you can be in the field, whereas in the field study has very high ecological validity. Now, ecological validity of the field study is maximum, very high, because that is done purely and solely in the natural setting, in the natural behavior. So, ecological validity, generalizability is high. In experiment, we can infer causal condition as their internal validity is high. Causal means what? Cause effect. What is the effect of independent on dependent? Why this particular condition is causing this behavior? Why the students are disturbed? Is it because of the noise? Is it because of the teaching method? That is independent variable. Since we are manipulating the independent variable and controlling the extraneous variable, so internal validity is high. That means control is maximum. When the control is maximum, then I can see that it is the cause and it is the effect. If the conditions are not controlled, then how I can say that it is the cause and it is the effect? So, in experiment, we can infer, we can estimate, we can infer causal conditions as their internal validity is high. In the field experiment, depending on the level of control of extraneous variable, they may have the high internal validity, and accordingly causing conditions can be inferred. As I have told you, little bit control you have on that independent variable, so some idea, estimate you have on the internal validity. But as far as the field studies are concerned, we cannot infer causal conditions as their independent, as their internal validity is low. Neither we are able to control the extraneous variable, nor we are able to manipulate the independent variable. So, that means internal validity is very low. When the internal validity is very low, we can't say that it is the cause, because in the open field, the natural setting, I don't know what are the other factors, which may be causing the behavior of the people, the sample whom you are studying. So, in field experiments, in the field studies, cause effect relations cannot be inferred, cannot be studied. The generalizability of the finding is limited, because you are doing study in the controlled conditions. You have the control, no natural behavior, no natural setting. So, generalizability of the result is limited, is low. The results can be generalized to some extent in the field experiment. When it is a field experiment, you can do the generalizability to some extent, but the results can be generalized maximum in the field studies. So, in the field studies, you know, the results can be generalized. So, generalizability is low in experiment, is limited up to some extent in the field experiment, and in the field studies it is the maximum. So, in today's lecture, we have tried to understand the quasi-experimental methods, in which I have told you the meaning of the quasi-experimental, what is field study, what is field experiment, and then we have made a comparison of the experiment, field study and the field experiment. So, this is all about the quasi-experimental methods.